Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wonderful evening to one and all. I'm glad that most of you could understand and do it very well, your preparatory test. And at the same time, this preparatory test is not for any competition. It's only to make sure that you understand the concepts properly. The competition has to be within yourself. So your formative assessment marks also, I am going to mail it separately to you. A group marks will not be displayed in the groups. You should know your marks, and the feedback is given after each answer, so that you go through the answers and see that where you have made the mistakes and what are the things that you have to still learn to master it. So please make sure that you are not competing with anybody. The competition has to be within yourself, right? So now let us complete the rest of transportation system, and then we can move back to, okay. So as you all know that I have already told you about. Something wrong with the share screen. Let me just go back. Yes. So one contraction and one relaxation of atria and ventricle is called a one cardiac cycle. What is cardiac cycle is a very common question most of the time you will be getting. So you should remember that you have got auricles and ventricles. So one contraction and relaxation of atria and ventricle makes one entire cardiac cycle. So do remember what is a cardiac cycle. And now coming to what happens to the deoxygenated blood from vena cava and oxygenated blood from pulmonary vein enters the right and the left atria respectively. I'm happy that all of you did this, could understand this question, that pulmonary veins carries oxygenated blood and pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood. So we see that deoxygenated blood from vena cava and oxygenated blood from pulmonary vein enters the right and left atria respectively. And then what is happening here is, if from the what is happening from right atria, now both the atria, they contracts, forcing the blood to enter into ventricles. From atrium, it's going into the ventricles. And ventricles, when they start contracting and atria starts relaxing, there is a ventricular contraction and auricular relaxation. And the blood is forced from these apertures between the atria and ventricles, is closed by the valves. Then we can listen to the first sharp sound of the heart, lub dub. I'm saying their sounds are lub dub sounds, so you can hear it when a doctor can make out the sound, hear to the sound through a stethoscope to see that whether your heart is functioning properly or not. So the blood which has entered the arteries tries to come back into the ventricles now. And the valves that are present in the blood vessels are closed to prevent the backward flow. And some of you made a mistakes, but majority of you could know that the function of the valves is to stop the backward flow of blood. So now we can listen to a dull sound of the heart, that is dub. So when it is there, lub sound is very clear, whereas dub is very silent. You have to be very carefully listening to it. There is the one is systolic, the other is diastolic. So whenever a doctor or anybody, or if you can also do it, measure your blood pressure, you can see that the first sound is very clear, systolic. But diastolic, the one has to be very careful in listening where the mercury level stops. So the atria filled up with the blood and are ready to pump them into the ventricles. So now this blood enters into the ventricles. So these sequential events in the heart, which are cyclically repeated. So these events of relaxation, contraction, and the flow of blood from auricles to the ventricles, this is a form of a cycle. It is happening again and again. So this is what is called as a cardiac cycle. And it includes an active phase of systole and resting phase of diastole of atria and ventricle. Whenever the auricles or the ventricles are in an active phase, that is a systolic one. The upper 120/80 is your normal blood pressure. So 120 is systolic and 80 is diastolic. So when it is in active phase, systolic phase, you can listen at the lup dub, lup dub. So lup sound is very clear. And then systolic, when then at the systolic sound, that is where a slow sound, and it is 120/80 per minute. That's what it is measured. So the whole process, it completes within 0.8 seconds. Imagine how the entire cardiac cycle process is completing in 0.8 seconds. And the time needed for atrial contraction is 0.11 to 0.14 seconds. And the time needed for ventricular contraction is 0.27 to 3.5 seconds. Hence, naturally, the blood is pumped into the blood vessels at a regular interval. It has to be a continuous process. The tissues will not receive the blood continuously in the form of a spurt, but how it is, the artery is passing into the hand to feel the pressure of the blood moving into it. And this is what is the pulse. You have already done your pulse, 76 to 78 beats per minute is supposed to be the normal pulse rate. And the rate of pulse will be equal to the number of heartbeats. How many times is your heart beating, contracting and relaxing, making one cardiac cycle, is as well as your pulse rate is same. In a 1 minute, it has to, the cardiac 78 cardiac cycles takes place. So now you are very clear about it. So now let's see what's the difference between single circulation and double circulation, and which are the organisms that has got single circulation. If you look at fish has got a single circulation. The blood circulation passes through the heart only once. Whereas in higher organisms like mammals, like we human beings, we have got double circulation, because the blood passes through the heart twice in the entire cycle. Auriculoventricular, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is circulating 2 times. So our circulation is double, whereas spices and the animals that live in water, especially fish, has got a single circulation. This type of circulation is called single circulation. The heart is called single circuit heart. Their heart is called as a single circuit heart, where the blood passes on only once in it. Whereas double circulation is seen in amphibians like frog. Frog has got double circulation, and once between heart and the lungs, and second time from the heart to the body parts. So such circulation is called as a double circulation, and heart is called double circuit heart. Whereas in single circulation like fish, it is called as single circuit heart. Now you see frog or any higher animals like reptiles, crocodiles, eels, or mammalians, as well as human beings, we have got double circulations. And now let us see, what do you mean by lymphatic system? So lymphatic system is, though some blood has got some amount of fluids, and has got solid materials also. Then also the consistency or viscosity is such that it flows, it has got a smooth flow from different junctions. So now what do we see? As the blood flows through, some amount of fluids are collected and sent back to the blood circulation by lymphatic system to supply nutrients to the tissue. We say that the main source of nutrients, food that we get, is through blood. So how is this lymphatic system helping in passing on the nutrients to the tissues? The liquid portion of the blood with nutrients flows out of the capillaries. This is called the tissue fluid. As we said, that capillaries are nothing but it's a Latin word for hair-like structures. The small hair-like structures that the capillaries present helps in passing on the nutrients to the tissues. And the lymphatic system is parallel system to venous system, which collects tissue fluids from tissues and transport from the venous system. So in the venous, and what it is, parallelly what is happening, oxygenated blood through the limbs is supplied in the form of nutrients to the tissues, and then the deoxygenated toxic material is collected back from the venous system to be excreted out. So both these parallelly simultaneously happening. So tissue fluids contain lymph present in the tissues. In Latin, lymphs means nothing but water. What is lymphatic? Lymphatic is, it's a water. 90% of our body tissue cells contains water. So the tissue fluids contains lymph. Lymph is nothing but water, and blood contains solid and liquid particles in the limbs. That contains lymph does not contain any solid particles. It is called all liquids. The muscles are attached to the skeleton and act as pumps. They contract and help in pushing. Even the contraction of the muscles are very important whenever we are moving. So vessels of the blood are flown in the veins towards the heart. So the muscles are attached to skeleton, acts as pumps, and the veins stop this reverse flow of blood because of the presence of valves in them. And this is a system of lymphatic circulation. Lymph circulation, lymphatic circulatory system is this, where lymph is nothing but water, and how it is supplying nutrients to the various different tissues. To lead a normal life, we need several items such as food grains, vegetables, fruits, clothes, medicines, fuel, electricity, all these things, isn't it? These are the basic needs that are required. So now, we even need, as we need transports to move from one place to another, isn't it? Vehicles and all. So is inside our body also, there is a transportation system that allows, because supposing, for example, I'm getting sugar from other state into, for example, from Karnataka, you're getting sugar into Telangana. How is it happening? How is these nutrients being, the food stuff is transferred through a transportation system. Similarly, inside our body also, all these nutrients are supplied from one place to another by a transportation system. So if you look at, and this transportation system is nothing new or is present only in the highly evolved animals. It was also present into the unicellular organisms, of the first unicellular organism, that is amoeba. So amoeba has got a protoplasm inside it, a liquid substance. Like we have lymphatic system, it was having protoplasm, which shows the natural movement. Every cell has got it inside it. So that unicellular organism like amoeba also had this system that shows, if you can see how the protoplasm, the movement of the this movement which amoeba is showing is called as a Brownian movement. This Brownian movement is through this Brownian movement, amoeba transports its nutrients to all parts of its body. So the simplest intracellular transportation system present in unicellular animals has been retained in multicellular animals. Even you have seen that how is cellular respiration and everything is happening through the cell. And then the protoplasm now also through the cells and the tissues, the nutrients are supplied. And multicellular animals who are highly evolved, complicated system of transportation materials. And how is it, like if you look at protozoans and the sponge, seawater transportation, since the natural water colors are not reliable, the sponges create their own currents by beating of their flagella that are present in their body. What happens is, like now we have got floods in Hyderabad. So these are which are, sometimes the natural ways may affect the organisms in its functioning. So sponges does not depend upon the natural water current. It has got its own current beats through its flagella. Flagella are small hair-like structures that are present that helps them in the movement. So those flagellas are used by beating the flagella that are present in the body. The sponges, the cnidarians are better evolved than sponges. This family makes sure that the jellyfish also, they have got a specialized gastrovascular system which helps in the digestion of the food and transportation of the nutrients to each and every cell and tissue cells of their body. And if you look at platyhelminthes are the worms. In the worms families also, we see a well-defined digestive system, highly branched, and it supplies digested food to all the cells. And then they have a excretory system also well defined, so that all the toxins after digestion, the toxins has to be excreted out of the body. And if you look at annelids, the first eucalimate animal have developed a pulsatile vessel to move the fluid, and transporting medium was nothing but blood. Blood was the only transporting medium. And if you look at orthopods, what are orthopods? Arth are nothing but joints. All the animals that have got jointed legs are called orthopods, and they have also developed a pulsating organs to pump the blood. The blood, instead of flowing in the blood vessels, food and the tissues, it is directly supplying oxygen to the respiratory system. In arthropods, if you see, cockroach is one of the example of arthropods which you can observe. So such type of transportation system which supplies nutrients to the tissues directly are the arthropods are the examples of it. And the other type of transportation system is blood takes the responsibility of delivering materials, flows in the blood vessels, and this is called a closed type circulatory system, okay, in which the blood is doing the work. Such type of closed circulatory system is present in annelids, echinoderms, cephalopods, mollusks, and all the higher animals. So all higher animals have got closed type of system where blood is supplying. And now coming back to blood pressure, I have already told you about it. Blood pressure, or BP, which is generally called as, is the, in a healthy individual, the normal BP is 120/80. So the numerator should be 120, which is systolic, and denominator is 80, which is represented by the diastolic pressure. So systolic has to be 120, diastolic 80. And this is being measured by an instrument called sphygmomanometer. And this condition is called hypertension. Supposing hyper is more, people may suffer with two types of pressures. Both are, it should be ideally 120/80. If it is higher than 120/80, you call it hypertension. And if it is lower than 120/80, then it is hypotension. Both hyper and hypotension is not good for a human being. So you just see, one of the reasons for hypertension could be because of the blockage of arteries, or presence of cholesterol, and improper functioning of kidneys. Bad habits like smoking, alcohol consumption can lead to high blood pressure. So all this is going to damage the heart. Hypertension can be prevented by diet control, moderate exercise, avoiding stress and strain, avoiding alcohol consumption and smoking. All this will help in the reduction of hypertension. And what do you mean by coagulation of blood? Coagulation of blood, you just see that if there is any cut on your in your body or any part of your body, you will see that after a certain time it naturally stops. So how is this coagulation taking place? When there is a wound, after a short time, there is a chemical reaction that is involved inside of a body called blood coagulation. So blood coagulation, we have got platelets. As I was telling you, that blood is made up of RBC, red blood corpuscles, WBC, white blood corpuscles, and platelets also. So these platelets, thrombocytes or platelets, they come join together, making a fibrin mesh, and they stop the flow of blood the clot is, otherwise, every person, we need to have 6 liters of blood inside our body. If it is drained out, then you suffer with anemia of less blood, and which is not good for your health. So the clot is 3 to 6 minutes. Within 3 to 6 minutes, then the cut is filled with a reddish solid material, which is called the blood clot. The platelets collect at the site of the injury and form the blood clot. So that is how this process of clotting, you can see the picture also, it's beautifully depicted here. This reduces the loss of blood to some extent, but certain times what happens, if the injury is very deep, you have to have a medical aid, stitches has to be done to see that the loss of blood is stopped. They also release factors in the blood which help in blood clotting and in the repair and healing of the blood vessels. So what else is released from inside? If you see the mechanism of it, thrombose. So what actually is happening inside our body? There is an enzyme called thrombokinase. So whenever this enzyme is released, this acts upon a substance called prothrombin, which is converting it into thrombin. You can see this being explained here. This thrombin, in the presence of enzyme thrombokinase and calcium, make a active thrombin. So a calcium deficiency also leads to, calcium is also very important. They say that along with that, otherwise, if there is a calcium deficiency also, you may not have that active thrombin production in the body. So this thrombin, it acts as another substance called fibrin that is present in dissolved state, converting into insoluble fibrin. So much of process that's happening inside to see that your body is taken care of, so that it is your loss of blood inside your body is stopped through a natural mechanism, and you are protected. So fibrogen, which is again converted into an insoluble fibrin. The blood cells entangles in the fibrin fibers, forming a clot. Entangles in the sense, the blood cells, they come together and get attached with each other in the fibrin fibers, and that's all they form a mesh-like net or mesh, which stops and forms a clot. You generally see whenever there is a wound, आप बोलते हैं कि wound के ऊपर सा black सा thick वो आ जाता है coverage after when you are playing, when you fell down, most of the time you feel it on your joints, knee joint and the elbow joints. Your wound is covered by a thick brown covering. So that is nothing but clot. Okay, the fibrins are attached to the edge of the wound and pull them together. This straw yellowish colored fluid protein after the formation of the clot is nothing but serum. You just see yellow pus like that comes out. That is the serum. So the blood oozes from the wound, clots in 3 to 6 minutes, and because of the, but it sometimes does not happen in all the individuals. There is a genetic disorder, and it is called hemophilia. Hemophilia is one of the disease in which genetic disorder, in the sense, it is hereditary. It has come from some grandparents, parents, from their ancestral time. So in this, for these people, whenever there is a cut, it's very dangerous. They have to be very careful and avoid cuts and accidents. And this disorder is called hemophilia because they don't have a natural system. Immediately, if they don't get a medical aid, they may die also because of the loss of blood from their body. So this condition is called as hemophilia, where they cannot, they don't have a natural system of clotting. The entire process which was shown where, in the presence of an enzyme thrombokinase and the fibrin, so that production, all this is not happening inside their bodies. So hemophilia is common disorder in the children who have born from marriages between very close relatives. Thalassemia, an inherited disorder, is also related to the blood disease. So even thalassemia is also one of the disease, and generally it's better to avoid close marriages within the close relatives. So the if the cousins are getting married, this is generally formed under this next generations. And there is a vast transport system and in continuous supply of essential nutrients and oxygen to perform the metabolic activities. Oxygen is very much needed, and we know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of a cell, and it helps in remove excretory substance and found in each cells of the animal body. So Van Helmont did an experiment on the plants, and which gets water and contains minerals. So what are plants doing? Root is absorbing water and the minerals and is supplying to the stem, leaves, and all parts of the tree. And similarly, the leaves are, what are leaves doing? Preparing food. Photosynthesis happens inside the leaf. And this prepared food is again supplied back to the plant. So what did Van Helmont did is, how is this happening? You will see that two types of upward and backward flow. From roots, it's reaching to the leaves, and from leaves, it's even reaching the food is supplied to the roots also. So what did he do is, the water absorbed by the roots and food prepared by the leaves are supplied to the remaining parts of the plant by a vascular bundle. You have already learned about xylem and phloem. So these vascular bundle, these tissues help in supplying of the food and minerals to all parts of the plant. The water absorbed by the roots and food prepared by the leaves are supplied to all parts of the plants. And the roots, the xylem tissue is situated towards the exterior in the stem, and it is arranged in the bundles towards the center. This you have already seen in your lab most probably. Otherwise, these pictures are also showing you, giving you a clear picture of it. So let us see an activity to see how roots, these activities, onion roots activities, I think 8th class and all you have already done, to see how it is absorbed in all parts of it. Color, we have used a different color of dye to see that how the absorption is taken place and the color of a vegetable is changing. So to show that water is absorbed by the root hair, this is our aim. Aim of our experiment is to show that water is absorbed. And mustard seeds are very quick to grow. You can try it out at home. Nowadays you are at home. These are very interesting activities to see how absorption is taking place. So mustard seed we need a filter paper, a cover slip, a drop of water, microscope, and hand lens. So these are the things required. All the students who are in the vicinity of this school, if they want to come visit, they have done their experiment with their slides, they can come to the school, use the microscope and see check out the observations. So what are the procedure? Roots have small hair-like structure called root hairs originating from the cells of a single layer epidermis. And then what are we doing? To this, so we have kept those roots, and they are hair like single layer epidermis. So we can see, look how you can see it under the microscope. You can clearly see all xylem, phloem, vascular bundles. Roots have small hair-like structure called root hairs. They are originating from the cells of a single layer epidermis. Root hair grow out into spaces between soil particles and the hair surrounded by the moisture. and how the xylem from the root in the upward direction. So the xylem carries it to the towards the upper part of the trunk of the tree. Every living cell acts as an osmosis. Osmosis is a system where the fluids move from lower to higher concentration. You have even done a lot of exercises on osmosis on eggs, potatoes, and all using sugar syrup in your earlier classes. So where you have seen that how it is being absorbed, the water fluid moves from lower to higher concentration. So here, the process that takes place is through osmosis. Osmosis and xylem tissues together make sure that this is supplied to the trunk of the tree, minerals from the ground soils. And the entry of the water dilutes the content of the root hair vacuole so that it becomes uh, 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 one second. Therefore, what is happening is water will pass into the vacuoles of the root hair by a process called osmosis. You know that the osmosis is nothing but the flow of water from lower to higher concentration. So naturally, it is moving towards the trunk where the concentration is high. So they enter the water, dilute the content of the root hairs vacuole so that it becomes more dilute than its neighboring cells. So if it is more dilute than its neighboring cells, it becomes easier for them to pass. So which in turn becomes dilute, and finally water enters into the xylem vessels. So and a pressure in xylem vessels develop which forces the water upwards. This total pressure is known as root pressure. So we have got an osmotic pressure as well as the pressure that is created by the xylem vessels. This is called root pressure. These together conducts all the minerals from the soil to the trunk or the upper part of the tree, plant. So now what is our observation? It is observed that water is present in xylem vessels. If water is not present inside the xylem vessels, the conduction cannot take place, because for osmosis it need to have a diluted, lower concentrated water liquid sap that would allow the pull. Higher concentration has to move towards the lower concentration. So, and what is our conclusion? The root hairs absorb water with mineral salts into the transport tissue called xylem vessels by a process of osmosis. So let us do an activity to know root pressure. The aim is to prove that water enters into xylem vessels by a process of root pressure. So what experiment are we doing is, what are the materials that are required? Potted plant with a cut stem, a rubber tube, a glass tube, and water. And what is the procedure? Take a regularly potted plant and cut the stem portion 1 centimeter above the ground level. Then connect a glass tube by means of a strong rubber tube. The size of the glass tube should be equal to the size of the stem. So that's how we are connecting it. And take care while joining tube and the stem being bound tightly so that water cannot escape from the tube. So this now pour some water in the glass tube until the water level can be seen above the rubber tube. So mark the level of the water in the tube. Keep the arrangement side for 2 to 3 hours, then observe and mark the water level M2 in the tube. So that's how we are collecting the sap, and we are able to see that conduction is happening. So what is our observation? It's observed that there's an increase of water level in the glass tube. The difference between M2 and M1 indicates the level of water raised in the stem. So conclusion, root absorbs water. This water enters into xylem vessels through osmosis from roots, and the water passes through xylem vessels into the stem. So that's how upward conduction is happening. So whatever is said, you shouldn't be believing. Do an experiment and see whether real conduction is happening or not. And try to add some So you can even do it by adding some salts or sugar solution to the already existing tube and just see that if it stops the conduction. To prove the transportation is done through stomata present in the leaf. So what the other is, stomata is present in the leaf. Transpiration also is, we are doing an experiment to see what all the things that is required are. We are taking a potted plant and covering it with a polythene cover to a small branch, and we are keeping it in the sunlight for some time, and then we observe that the inner side of the polythene cover has got water is absorbed by the root hair, and there is a push from below due to the root pressure on the column of the water in the xylem vessels, and that's how the water is out. So root pressure can push water upwards by not more than a few meters. This is enough to supply water from roots to the leaves in small herbaceous plants. So that is how it is being shown. However, there are huge trees as tall as 120 meters high in some trees, where water has to be pushed several meters upwards against the Earth's gravitational pull. And water is absorbed by osmosis from the soil by the root hair and is passed into the xylem vessels, which forms a continuous system of tubes through roots and stems into the leaf. So as in our system, how the arteries and veins are working. Similarly, the vascular bundles, xylem and phloem, is also doing the same function. 2% of the water is utilized by the plants, and the excess 98% of the water evaporates and passes into the atmosphere through stomata in the leaves. So we have seen about the stomata and its function. The evaporation creates the main pull from above the root pressure, which gives a variable and the huge trees around. So that's how this is evaporating. The water is evaporating out of the tree. Now, what is our observation? It is observed that the inner side of the polythene cover is moist with water drops. We can see water drops inside. And so we can infer that the excess of water from the plant evaporates through the stomata of the leaves with the atmosphere. And this process is called transpiration. Like we have got kidneys for excreting as an excretory system, so as the stomata in a plant. Mineral salts are necessary for the plant nutrition, and they are obtained from soil solution through the root hair. The salts are in the form of electrically charged ions. Here also your chemistry comes again. You know, they are the ions, electrically charged ions. We were seeing how sodium chloride ionic bonds are forming. So similarly here, sodium chloride is in the form of sodium and chlorine, and magnesium sulfate occurs as Mg+2 and SO4-2, forming a strong bonds. How this is, so these all are the minerals, and but they are not absorbed in the root hairs by a simple process of diffusion, but it involves the use of energy by the cytoplasm. So there is a sort of energy that is created by cytoplasm, and once ions are observed, the ions travel along with water in the xylem vessels and pass to the growing points of the plants. So they are used for the growth purpose. They may also pass laterally from the xylem to the phloem. Thus, mineral salts are one of the natural factors in the plant growth phenomenon. Phenomena, it's a natural phenomena, and in that we'll see that it is happening. So transport of manufactured food. So biologists studied that food transportation in the plant with the help of aphids. We see aphids clustering around the young stems of the plant, feeding on the plant juice. So aphids are the small insects we see which are responsible for, they are the arthropods actually, aphids. So which are, you can see the joint legs on it. So they suck from the stem, they are sucking food, and let us see how they are helping in transportation. So it's an interesting how nature is dependent on one another. And if you are destructing this system, that's what has happened. The floods in Hyderabad that is now is a man-made. This disaster is happening because we did not allow water. There was a water bodies, and we did not allow the water to get stored into those water bodies. We have destructed, we have grabbed those lands, and on that we have constructed houses, and we did not allow water to stay. So what water is doing? It is bringing floods, There are a lot of destruction. We are facing lot of problems during heavy rains, and during summer what is happening, we see that we are thirsty and the scarcity of the water, and we want water and we are not getting water at that time. This is all because we are not planning properly, we are not looking scientifically, we are thinking that these animals and water, we can do anything because we are human beings and we have mind and we can destroy others, but we don't know how these things can also destroy us. So these amphids, what are they doing? To obtain this juice, and an amphid pierces the plant tissue with its long antennae and feeding its body in, and then carefully cut away, leaving the halo proboscis is still inserted into the phloem. So it is found that because the content of the phloem sheath tubes are under slight pressure, the fluid slowly exudes from the cut end of the proboscis in the form of drops. And these drops are then collected and analyzed. So the biologists have analyzed these drops. The fluid is found to contain sugars and amino acids inside this. So that is the reason the concentration is high. It is inferred that food is transported in the phloem cells. So when we have taken it out from the phloem, we can see that it contains sugars and amino acids. The condition of the sugar by phloem has been by removing the ring of the bark from the shoot to expose the wood. What we did is remove all tissues from the center outwards, including the phloem. After a few days, when the tissues above and below the ring were analyzed, what did we see? It was shown that the food had accumulated above the ring, but was not present below it. Below the ring, we did not see. If it is left for some more time, the stem increases in thickness immediately above the ring, but no growth occurred below it. Okay, so any damage to the phloem all around the stem will prevent food from passing down to the roots, and the tree will eventually die. So this is how, if we are doing this, certain mammals scratch the bark of the trees to get the food stored in the phloem, especially during hard winters when food is scarce. So this generally we see it. It's some certain times, wolves in this to young saplings at ground level, and rabbits can do much damage in the to the older ones. So this ends your transportation system, where we have seen how transportation takes place in human beings, plants, animals, unicellular organisms, and how is nature responsible, what is nature doing, and why we should protect ourselves. So make sure now you are a students of science and you know so much about maintaining the ecosystem and allowing coexist. How can we coexist with each other? We have to think about animals, waters, minerals. These all are required for our living. So this present floods in Hyderabad is one of the best example, and you being the science students, think of the innovative ways that what can we do, how can we protect and reserve these resources during rainy season and utilize them during summer. So all the best, take care, protect yourself, follow all the norms, social distancing, mask, SMS rule. Don't forget that SMS is social distancing, and mask has to be used at any cost. Okay. So see you all in the next. Hope you have understood everything. Whatever is not clear, please message me or mail me. And as I told you, all your answers of formative assessment will be mailed to you. Please go through the feedback and see how better you can compete within yourself. Please don't compete with others, and copying is not going to help you, because whatever you're not understanding, there is always a chance to improve and see that your understanding levels increases. And more you understand, more interesting the science, biology, and the entire science and all the subjects would become interesting if you are understanding it. So take care. Allah Hafiz.